Okay, so this tutorial will be really quick. All semester I've been going on about kind of procedural animations. I guess another way to think about animation that happens, motion, is with simulation. So we can have procedural systems that we set up and drive this, and certainly simulation can be embedded and woven into that. But in this case, we're just going to do this a physics simulation, right, to drive the animation. So the student is interested in a character jumping down these stairs and being chased by all these balls, right? So I don't want to do this just kind of step by step for exactly what it is that student wants to do, but I want to cover the concept. So I'm not going to set up the stairs or anything like that, but I am going to refer to that. So if you're wondering what the hell is Dane talking about, that's the genesis of this little tutorial. But I just want to, and this will be really quick, just to show how the physics can work, right, in a scene. Okay, so to do this, in the project, the student is going to have a whole bunch of balls. So instead of that, I'm going to use actually a bunch of cubes. And of course, because I'm cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, when it comes to using the cloner system, right, I'm going to create this cube. I'm going to put it in the clone system. I don't know, let's say 5 by 5 by 5. And let's just shorten this down by, 15. So I get this big grid, this big old block, right, of cubes. Let's make this plane a little bit bigger. I want a little more of a ground plane, so let's say 1500 maybe. Okay, so I've got this big space to play with, and I've got these little cubes. And it bothers me that they're all the exact same size as always, so I'm going to go and add a little bit of random. And let's go to the parameter, and let's just make this 5 by 5 by 5. Ooh, they're intersecting a little bit. How about 3 by 3 by 3? I don't want to have, in this case, I don't want to have them intersecting with each other, so maybe just a little bit less, 2 by 2 by 2. And maybe what I need to do on the cloner system is make this just a little bit bigger. There we go. I just want to space it out. And just the way the simulation works, we don't want to have objects already intersecting with each other. They can be up against each other, but we don't want them to be overlapping, I guess maybe is the better word. And maybe related to the random, maybe more importantly, let's change the scale a little bit. All right, just for fun. I don't even know why. Just so they're a little bit different and there's a little bit of variation. The main thing is I didn't want to place a whole, these one by one. I just wanted a big group of them. So if I have this set up in the cloner system, I could come up here and I'm just going to, so I'm going to set this up to do the physics simulation. Actually, not sure it will work this way. I actually think it won't, so that I can show it the solution to this. But let's start. So the first thing is, let's start with a ground plane. That's the easy one. So we need, when I let go of these objects, gravity's going to take hold and they're going to fall and crash into each other and hit the ground. But I have to tell it for that to happen. So I'm just going to right click on the plane, and I'm going to go to simulation tags. So the things that the type of tags are all going to be in here. And I'm going to turn this into a collider body. So physics is not going to work on this. It's not going to fall. Gravity's not going to take hold of it or anything. But when other objects that are tagged with rigid body run into it, they'll bounce and collide and all those little things. So I'm going to say this is a collider body. And I'm not going to worry about the settings for a second. And then I'm going to go over to the cube here, and I'll go to simulation tag and do rigid body. So collider body, rigid body, and I'm going to give myself a few more frames, like 300, just so I can watch how the simulation works. And actually, it does work just fine with that cube that's in here. The one thing, because this is a cloner, is they're all going to react the same. So if you wanted to get to the point, like if you had, let's say you had like 5 or 6 little objects, you could put individual tags on them and put different settings in there. So maybe one cube is bouncier than the other or not. So let's look just a little bit at these settings. So this is nice, right? So I get a simulation and it does some things and they kind of fall apart and mush, right? The settings here underneath the dynamics, there's a transition time. I wouldn't even worry about these. The main thing here is just enable, right? So what I could do is go to frame 0, and I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to hit the keyframe, and maybe at frame, I don't know, 40, I'm going to hit that keyframe again, and then I'm going to go to frame 41, and then I'm going to turn it on. So what I've done is say, let's not enable the simulation here at the beginning. And then once we get to frame 41, and it looks like, did I put a keyframe there? There we go. So let's see what happens. Right, so it pauses at that setup. So I don't get anything at first, and then it turns on. Collision, let's make the balance 50%, right? We'll end up seeing, let's make the friction like 99%. The forces, this has to do with like how gravity is affecting dampening. Just means it's kind of like another friction setting. It's like air drag is down here, right? Is one of these, and we can put different forces in here: attractors, turbulence, wind, all those things, right? So let's just go ahead and play this. All right. And you can see that they're kind of moving around a little bit in the animation that the student's going to do. They're going to be balls bouncing, so I'm not going to worry about changing those settings to worry about that. It already has just kind of its own mass calculated, so I don't have to worry about that at all. But the one thing that's important here is that the student is going to have the balls at the top of the stairs. And what we need is the balls to move forward, right? And there's several ways that we could do this, but in a fun little way, in a way that gets to teach forces. So I'm going to select the cube here, and I'm going to go up to simulate, and underneath that is forces. And there's attract, deflect, there's fields, like we can use field forces in here. It gets kind of complicated. But what I want here in this case is the wind. And this is just kind of like a cheap little hack, I guess. But it's a good way to demonstrate what this object does. So you can see, if I click off of it, you can see it looks like a windmill. How appropriate here in Lubbock, Texas, right? That we have the windmill icon. And it has a direction of which way it's pointing. So actually, I don't want it to be pointing that way. I want it to point the other way, just because I created more room in this direction for it to go that way. So I'll just go to coordinates and change the heading so that it's facing that direction, right? Okay. And then the wind underneath the object settings is wind speed is 5 centimeters. So let's make it 50. Uh-oh, it's going to get crazy. Let's see what happens. Oh, and then the other thing is we need to go to the tag here, and we need to make sure, so what forces are going to be used, and I'm going to say include. I actually don't know if it's not put in here, if it just, in fact, let's just find out. Right, you see nothing's happening. It doesn't appear that there's any wind to play. So I'm going to take the wind and put it in the force list. The force mode in the force list, very Star Wars-like. So I put the wind in here and I say, I want you to include this. The reason that you have an exclude is maybe you have a whole bunch of forces and you don't want them to, one of them to be seen, but I'm going to say include. And let's see here if this, it seems that the wind is working this time. What do you think? Okay, so that seems like a little much, right? We don't want the balls to go racing, but we do want them to get started that way. So I'm going to do a little trick. Here, frame 40 with the wind, I'm going to set this at, maybe let's just try 25 centimeters of wind speed. And then by frame 45, let's have it at 0. And it's probably still going to be too much, but we'll find out here in a second. No, actually not enough. So let's make it here at the beginning. Oops, actually I should make it, I put that keyframe at 40. It should be, well, let's put it there. And I'll just keep upping it. Let's make it 100. So it's almost like a little mini explosion, I guess, is what I'm trying to do. That was perfect, right? So I just wanted to nudge the objects in that direction. And of course, if I have the balls set up so that they start bouncing that way, they'll start going down the stairs. So I'm using the force and animating its the speed here, the strength of it, to get the objects moving that kind of direction, right? Give them some momentum. And there's other ways to deal with this, but this is a real simple way to set this up, right? So if we had balls that were going to bounce on the surface, we would get, let's see, I've got bounce, let's make that like 85%. Instead of these being, what did we make the object? I think it was, and I'm just duplicating this so we get a clone that's, instead of iterate, let's just say random. Okay. Oh, the chaos. Oh, the destruction, right? All right, and again, this is just a ground plane. So if you're going to use this on the stairs, the one thing to keep in mind is, depending if you want the balls to just be going down the stairs, you'd have to either be really fancy with your simulation, or you might want to have some walls. You could also create some walls that are collider objects, but you could make them invisible so they don't render. Of course, that might look weird when we see the ball kind of bounce off nothing coming down the space, but just keep that in mind, that sometimes you use objects as kind of dummy objects for the simulation itself. Okay, I'll play it one more time because it's fun. So this was your first little primer on how to use simulation using the collider tag and the rigid body tags on these objects to run a physics simulation in C4D. Yay!